Hey everyone, welcome to another version of JPN's pre-med video series. First, we want to introduce ourselves as the co-chairs of JPN's pre-med division. My name is Mendy Lebowitz. I got my smicha at the Rabbinical College of America in Morristown. I then got a Bachelor's of Science at the University of Miami, and now I am an MD PhD student at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. My first time here. My name is Mendy Zlatopolsky. I got my smicha and a bachelor's degree from Rabbinical College of America. I was actually there together with Mendy Lebowitz. I then got a bachelor's degree in science from Excelsior College, did a post-bac at Harvard, and now I'm a first year at SUNY Downstate.
So today we're going to speak about the extracurriculars of your pre-med experience. So shadowing, clinical experiences, research, volunteering, and we're going to speak about when you should be doing these things, how much of them you should be doing, and where you can find these opportunities. So we'll start with shadowing. So what is shadowing? It's essentially following a doctor around as they work. Usually comes with very few responsibilities other than paying attention, listening to the doctor and the patient, watching the doctor-patient interaction. However, some doctors may ask you to do some more. For example, I shadowed a doctor who, by the end of my shadowing experience with him, I was taking patient history and then presenting it to him. Mendy, did you have any more responsibilities than just paying attention?
No, they're not. They're not going to be pimping you. I hope not. If they're pimping you, find another doctor to shadow. Yeah.
But it's important to remember that you're going to need a letter of recommendation from one of the doctors that you shadow. It's likely you will need that. So, while this may not be the most fun or important learning experience you're going to have as a pre-med, you do have to take it seriously, at least enough that you'll get a strong letter of recommendation from a doctor.
I never had that. I don't have a letter from anybody I shadowed. Yeah.
Okay, so I did. Actually, my pre-med track at the University of Miami required me to have one of my letters from a doctor that I shadowed. Yeah. So it's my opinion that specialties don't matter as much. Even if you know now as a pre-med that, hey, I want to do this, I don't think it's that important to necessarily shadow that doctor who specializes in that field. I think the main point of this experience is just to get the clinical exposure and the patient-doctor interaction. Mendy, did you seek out specialties on purpose, or did you just find whatever was available?
Yeah, you just take whatever's available. It's hard to find someone to shadow, and just I think it might be even good to get the basics. You don't necessarily want a specialty. You want to see if this is what you love, this is what you enjoy, this is what shadowing is about, right? This is not something you're going to be padding your resume with. And maybe this is something we'll speak about in a few minutes, but this is just to see, is this what I want to spend the rest of my life doing?
Right. And
it's a very big beginning of your career.
And that's why, primary care, family medicine, these are ideal shadowing opportunities for a pre-med. Neurosurgery is not really a great shadowing experience. While it's cool and it sounds cool, there's a lot, you don't get to see a patient-doctor interaction much, or you may not. So those just primary care, those are the things that you should be aiming for here, even if you've identified a specialty that you would like to practice one day. All right, so when and how much should you shadow? So for all these experiences that we're going to talk about today, I put summers, spring, and winter break in during the semester, basically to tell you that these are things that you should be thinking about throughout your pre-med education and experience. It's always better with all of these to spread things out than to have just one or two super concentrated times where you do all these things. It's better to show longitudinal experiences, continuity. So if you do it every summer, if you do it, a few hours during your spring and winter breaks, and even a few hours during your semesters, that's the ideal way to do this. Mendy, was your experience similar?
So I think that is really good advice about every other extracurricular besides shadowing. I think shadowing is, of everything you do, shadowing is the least important thing. I'll actually rephrase that. It's super important to make sure that this is what you want to do. But after you've decided, yes, 100%, I'm in medicine, then there's so many other things that are so much more important. And so shadowing is very important, but I think get your 50 hours and get out, because it's not that stimulating. It's not that exciting. There's so many other better opportunities that we're going to go through in this slideshow, which I think you should be doing over the course of your 4 years in undergrad. And so like this should be like your beginning, you know, your first semester, first summer, but then move on to bigger and better. That's my personal opinion.
All right. All right. So like I put my opinion there, better to spread it out, right? Mendy has his opinion of it's better to concentrate, just get it done, and then move on to more meaningful clinical experiences. But in general, with your clinical experiences, your volunteering, your research, it's better to have longitudinal experiences than to just
100%.
show the resume pattern. All right. So it's important to keep track of your hours. The physician you shadow might be keeping track, but it's important that you stay organized. Like every part of pre-med, it's important to stay organized and you keep track. I know the University of Miami's pre-med required us to do 120 hours, and that's just because that's what they were told by medical schools. I know Mendy heard 50 hours, so you know it's worth talking to your pre-med advisor, to your degree advisor. It's worth looking at the med schools that you want to go to, their requirements. But the main thing is to stay organized. Mendy, how many hours did you do?
Yeah, like 30 to 50. I don't remember exactly, but not that many.
Right. Okay. So like I said, you may be required to submit to your pre-med track. Now, something important about shadowing, and the point of these videos is to give you guys really how it is. Often, the amount of hours and the quality of the experiences is something that gets embellished both by your physician and by you on your applications. I know people who have done 30 hours of shadowing and it was signed off as 120. It's just the nature of the beast. If you really, really, really love an experience, like for example, for me, that was research. For Mendy, that was other clinical experiences. You know, you're going to have those hours because you enjoy what you're doing. If it's something you don't enjoy, and most of us really didn't enjoy shadowing, it's just something that may or may not get embellished. It's just how it is.
And we obviously do not embellish, but you know, we know people.
Yes, exactly. Correct. All right. So how can you get the shadowing experience? So if your school has a pre-med track, pre-med advisor, check with them. Right. There's also word of mouth connections, and this is one of the most important ways that you can get shadowing, because these will be personal connections for the most part. So you can ask your parents or your friends if they know any doctors who may be willing to have you shadow them. You can also reach out to us at JPN by the WhatsApp group, by email. You can comment below, and there'll actually be a Google form in the description that you could fill out, where we'll try to match make shadowing experiences for you based off of your interest and location. Mendy, how did you find doctors to shadow?
Family, friends.
Okay,
it's hard to get opportunities. So JPN might be a phenomenal resource to find doctors to shadow, and I think we're working on a database of doctors who are willing, you know, to allow pre-med students to shadow them. So Mark and JPN might be a phenomenal resource for this.
Yeah, for sure. And I shadowed a neighbor, right? A family friend and a neighbor. And then he hooked me up with other people who he was friendly with so I could get my hours. But it all started with just that personal connection. All right, other clinical experiences. So I found this quote on the AAMC's website, and I think it's really important to understand, right? So in a recent survey of medical school admissions officers conducted by the AAMC, 87% of survey respondents, so 87% of the med school admissions officers that responded to the survey indicated that they accept an alternate activity instead of clinical shadowing. And this is what Mendy was going to. Shadowing is an experience that's almost antiquated nowadays, I would say, because you don't do much, you don't learn much, and it's really just to check off that box. If there's other clinical experiences that you can do, you can see the vast majority of med school admissions officers will accept that as an alternate activity. And with these, you'll really gain valuable clinical experience that you can use in medical school. You'll really gain valuable clinical experience that will strengthen or discourage your choice in medicine. And that's an important thing to have before you decide to embark on this path. So some examples: you could be a hospice volunteer, you could be a nursing assistant, you could be a caretaker, you could be a medical scribe, volunteer EMT or Hatsala, a paramedic. You can even be a COVID vaccine administrator. Mendy, did you have any clinical experiences that weren't shadowing?
Yes, I had. I was a medical assistant for a while, gaining really good experience just working with patients direct patient care. Um, I gained really good insights into the population health in the community that I was working with, which is really what the school that I eventually got accepted to and I'm attending was really looking for. They really emphasized the community, working with the community, and so I got really good insight, which I was able to translate to. I had a great conversation on my interview about this. I wrote about this extensively in my application. I think clinical experience is the number one thing that you want on your resume. Like, this is it. If there's anything that should be outstanding, this is the most important one.
All right. All right. So when and how much? Similar to shadowing, but maybe reinforce even more because I think right these experiences are more important than shadowing, right? So you should do them similar to shadowing, summers, spring, winter break during the semesters, spread them out, keep track, and submit them if you are required to submit them to places. But the most important thing, keep track, because you can do this over the course of 1, 2, or 3 years, and then comes time for the application, and they'll ask you exactly how many hours you spent on an experience. And if you haven't been keeping track, it's really hard to give an accurate estimate. So stay organized, keep track, make an Excel sheet, and keep track of your hours.
Also, an important thing to mention about your hours. People don't realize when you submit your hours on your application, you're actually also submitting your projected hours until the start. So if you're like a medical assistant or you're an EMT and you project that in your gap year, you're going to be working, if you have a gap year, you're going to be working 2,000 hours. Those 2,000 hours are included in your hours. And let's say halfway through gap year, you've only completed 1,000 and you decide to quit. That's okay. And you might want to let the school know. You don't necessarily have to, unless it's like something really drastic, but like make sure you clear those hours because you might I got a significant amount of hours from my gap year.
That's good advice. Yeah, and keep track of them, whether in the past or anticipated. All right, where can you get these clinical experiences? How can you get these clinical experiences? Right, these may be even harder to find than shadowing experiences, depending where you are in the country and what connections you already have within the medical field. All right, so you can Google relevant job openings. For example, medical scribes. I know those are fairly in demand almost anywhere. So, if you're okay with the pay and you're okay with the hours that are available, you should be able to find some jobs like medical scribes just by the job websites. You can ask local clinics where you live if they would allow you to work for them. If you're okay with unpaid hours, then I have a hard time imagining some places would turn you down, except for COVID restrictions. Or you can see if they're looking for some sort of medical assistant that would be paid. So it's a bonus. You can sign up for.
A lot of clinics are really desperate for medical assistants and scribes and stuff now. So look at your local urgent cares and stuff and doctors' offices. They might be dying for you.
For sure, and you might even be able to negotiate, some nice benefits in terms of pay. So not only are you padding your resume, not only are you getting those experiences, but you're also, getting padding your bank account as well. So that might be really nice. All right, so you can sign up for medical training courses for like certified nursing assistant, EMT, paramedics. These take a little bit more time, but once you have certification, you really increase your opportunity for clinical exposure, right? Someone who is a trained paramedic and wants to volunteer for Hatzalah, right, is going to have more clinical exposure than a medical scribe or something like that, right? So, medical scribes do have clinical exposure, but if you're a frontline responder because you have the training for it, you really increase your opportunity. All right, Mendy, anything to add about clinical experiences before we move on?
No, I think that was good. That was great.
Okay. All right, research, another critical component of your pre-med experience and application. So according to recent data from the MSAR, and we'll explain what that is in another video, just know that it's the official data from the AAMC, from the AMCAS. The overwhelming majority of applicants, think like 90% or higher, who matriculate to med school have done research during pre-med. Mandy, just yes or no, have you done research?
I have, yes.
I have as well.
I do know that a lot of students do not have research and they still
Right.
get in.
So
But
I think students of JPN's population, right, do have a lot of experience, I should say, because generally the ones who are the yeshiva graduates or people who went through the yeshiva system who are in JPN and who've got into medical school, they have, I would say, a lot of life experience, right? They're generally a little bit older. Often they're married. Maybe they have kids. Maybe they have a degree like Smicha. Maybe they've been through more, so they have stronger applications in other aspects. But in general, just if you were to take all matriculants to medical school in the country in the past couple of years, over 90% have done research. So if you want to set yourself apart even more, it's good to do it. If you can't, you can't, and you'll have to strengthen your application in other ways. But if you have the time to do it and you have the drive for it, definitely do it. All right.
also,
So
it's
yeah.
it's also like not only for padding your resume, but it's also super crucial to know how to do research, especially now. Step one is pass fail. If you want to get into any competitive specialty, you really got to know how to do research. And so get started early on. Get your feet wet. It's hard to know even like how to begin, how to do any research. So the more experience you get, the better.
Yeah, definitely. And if I'm not mistaken, Mendy, right, almost every med school now has built into their curriculum some discovery/research time, right, where you're required to do a research project. Do you guys
Yeah.
have that?
Yes, sure.
So if you have that exposure already as a pre-med, it makes it easier, but it also really just strengthens your application. And a strong relationship with a research mentor can yield an excellent letter of recommendation. For me, myself, I did research for 3 years as an undergrad, and I became very close with my research mentor. And her letter of recommendation, I would say, was probably the strongest part of my application. Not my extracurriculars, not my personal statements, not my grades, my letter from her and my work that we did together. That was the strongest part of my application. And that may not be the case for everyone. You may have a really great letter of recommendation from a shadowing physician or from a professor, right? But for my personal experience, my research mentor gave me a fantastic letter of recommendation.
I do think
All
for
right.
MD PhD, this is so much more important, obviously, and so it's not like 100% necessary. But of course, you want research, but for MD PhD, it's so much more important.
Definitely, and
Like
we'll speak about that.
there's
We'll speak about that in a minute. But so publications, while not necessary, right, will help you stand out, right, especially if it's a dual degree program, which we'll speak about. But just in general, if you have a scientific publication, if you have an authorship, you just move your application up higher on the stack when med schools are reviewing them. Now, Mendy, do you have an authorship?
okay. I will say I did have an authorship, but I don't think you need that at all. I don't think for regular MD or DO, I don't think you need to be published.
Okay.
You need the hours, but a publication, I don't know if that's really necessary.
No, I don't think it's necessary. But do you think that it helped you stand out?
Oh yeah, 100%. Hey, if you're first author in Nature cured cancer, good for you,
Right.
man.
Exactly. So I did not have a publication by the time I got into medical school. So right, and I'm in a dual degree MD PhD. So obviously, you see, it's not absolutely necessary, but it definitely, right, with everything about the med school application process, the more you have in terms of what can set you apart from the pack, the better chance you will have of getting into medical school.
Right, but I think a publication is super super gunner. So
Right.
if you don't have one, no worries.
All right. So when and how much, similar, right? If you have a drive for research, then I would say do a lot of it. If you don't really want to do research, maybe this is also another experience where it's all right to just blast a little bit of it in a few concentrated periods and then move on. Like I write here, right?
I
One or
will
two
say,
research.
but
Go
you
for
got to
it.
know how to do research. Like I'm discovering now in med school that I should have done more as an undergrad because it's hard to do research. Research is hard, and so you got to know what you're doing. So, and that's by experience.
Right. So now I know a lot of undergrad institutions can have research for credit. So at University of Miami, the reason that I did research for 3 years is because I needed a bunch of electives, right? And research for credit was I could take 3 credits of research. It meant 9 hours a week. I was in a lab where I was having a lot of fun. I was really close with my mentor, my research mentor. I was really close with the grad students and my lab partners. And so instead of doing a class where I needed to take tests or write essays, worry about finals, I took research for credit throughout my undergrad experience from my sophomore through my senior year. So if your institution has something like that and you need credit hours to knock off, right, and you don't know what you're going to do with them, and you're going to choose to do a Hebrew elective just because it's easy. Sometimes you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by doing a research class. Now, if you don't have research electives like at University of Miami, that's fine. It may be a little bit harder to find research opportunities, but we'll speak about that in a minute. All right, the more the better, right? But not at the expense of your grades or MCAT prep, and especially the more the better if you get that publication. But like we said in the last slide, don't do this at the expense of other things. It's super gunner. It's great. But if it means that your MCAT prep is going to suffer, or your grades are going to suffer, or clinical experiences are going to suffer, I wouldn't necessarily say do research more. And then, but if you're applying to a dual degree program like MD, PhD, or MD, MS, MA, right, research may be more important than shadowing your clinical. You have to really know what you want to go for. MD, PhD, I would definitely say research is more important. For an MD and a master's, maybe less so, but know what you're going for. And if you decide you want to go for a dual degree program, then it would be important to focus on research and to try to get that publication.
I think in general, it's very school dependent. Like for sure, MD, PhD, they want research. That's the most important thing. Let's say you're going to SUNY Downstate, for example, where I am, and it's very service oriented. They want to see a lot of service, a lot of community service, clinical community service, volunteering. If you want to, even if you're doing MD, not PhD, but you're going to NYU or Harvard or something, they're going to want a lot of research too. So it's school dependent. Check out what does your school want most.
But the thing, Mendy, is that unfortunately we don't know where we're going to end up, right? So that's why it's important. Yes, it's important to have at least a little bit of everything, right? Because unless I'm not going for a research medical school, right, and then I'll focus only on service, or I'm gunning for a dual degree MD, PhD, and so I'm going to let my clinical experiences slack a little bit for that extra research. But if it's just in general, you're applying to an MD or DO program and you want to you don't know where you'll end up. It depends on your MCAT scores, depends on your applications, on the interviews. It's important to have a little bit of everything.
Exactly. You need a little bit of everything, but if you're planning on going to a top 20 school, you need a lot of research.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
All right, where can you get research experiences? So contact current or former science professors. They may have labs, they may know of labs that are looking for research assistants. These could be paid or unpaid jobs, like in clinical experiences. You can find labs that pique your interest and get in touch. If you are super interested in some sort of cancer bio lab in Manhattan, and you find the email of the lab head, send them an email, tell them who you are, attach your CV, say why you want to work with them, what you find interesting about their work, and ask them if they have a spot for you. Speak to advisors, speak to physicians you shadow to see if they know of any clinical research, like clinical trials. And it can be hard to make connections if you're not in a large research university, but like we said, it's a critical component of your med school application, especially if you're gunning for the top schools. You can also reach out to JPN. We may be able to make connections. This is a little bit harder to make connections than shadowing, however. Mandy, anything to add? How did you find your research experience?
Yes, in my experience, this is the hardest thing to find. If you're in Turo, like it's hard to find. A friend of mine was like cold emailing people, and he finally got through to someone, and he invited me along. I got lucky through a good friend. Literally, it's hard to find. Just email and call and don't give up.
All right. And like, and my experience was, right, I was in a large research university. There were research opportunities, you know, that were abundant. You could have whatever field you wanted. All you had to do was just, speak to an advisor, get in touch, and it was simple. And these were often paid as well.
If you're in like big university, and like especially with the upper level biology courses, try to like develop a good connection with the professors. You're in your immunology or genetics or something like that. Immunology has so many labs. They're always doing research. If you're doing a cancer course, or even just intro to bio, like make a connection with your professor, and try to get tight with them and get something through that.
Definitely. All right. And last, and this is an important, maybe just as important as the three of them combined, is volunteering, but not just volunteering. We're going to say this is all just being a well-rounded, worldly, good human being. So, for example, right, it's important to volunteer and have well-rounded experiences, right, both inside the academic and clinical world and outside the academic and clinical world, both paid and not paid. It's important to show that you are not just a pre-med student who lives, breathes, eats pre-med. It's important to show that you are a normal functioning human being as well. So, for example, mentoring, tutoring, that's in the academic world. Athletics, employment. If you work at your local Trader Joe's as a bagger, right? It's something that's meaningful. You speak to a lot of people every day. You're out in the community. If it's important to who you are, that demonstrates that you have an experience that is valuable. And med schools want to see that you are normal human beings as well. Community volunteering, right? Food banks, humanitarian missions, even babysitting or nannying, right? A lot of us have done babysitting. But if it's something that you're really passionate about, or anything that you're really passionate about, don't think it's trivial. If it's an important component of who you are, then it's an important component of your application. Because med school applications are not just about checking the boxes, or not always just about checking the boxes. Once you pass the check the box stage, they often look at you as a person and who you are and what you're going to bring to the school. And so for that, they want to see that you are a well-rounded human being, right? And for this, maybe more than anything, sustained activity is more important than just resume padding. Because if you're just resume padding, hey, look, I'm a good human being for 6 weeks of the last 4 years, it's kind of obvious. Mendy, you have anything to add? What did you do in this field?
So I think you said it perfectly. So obviously the volunteering and all, but just like the hobbies, just be an interesting person. Like if that's playing an instrument, you're a cantor and you're shul, you're and like anything. It could be anything. You like sports, you do ballet, whatever. Like I want to hear something fun. You read books even. I don't know. Just find anything that you love to do. Do what you love. Like literally just be on the interview. Like your hobby's gonna come up and they're gonna ask you, oh, this sounds so cool. And you're all passionate about it because you actually love what you do. Hey, if that's Netflix, I'm a film critic and I love to eat, meaning I'm a great cook and I love to incorporate other whatever it is, But if you're passionate about eating, be passionate about cooking, and I don't know, you can make a hobby out of it. Just be an interesting person outside
Definitely.
of pre-med. Exactly what
Definitely.
you said.
And I would say, right, what maybe set me apart in my application from the general, from the general class, right? Maybe not from some of my JPN peers, was that I had a lot of unique experiences as in Shlichus, when I spent a year in Australia working in a shul, working with a community. I got a ton of unique experiences over there. And you can play them up, but it was really important to who I was, to who I am. So, even if it's just what we think of as run-of-the-mill yeshiva or seminary or Beis Yaakov experiences, you can find that if you look and examine those experiences that you've had, they really define who you are. And you can gain passion for them, even if you don't think you actively have it. And then you'll see when the time comes for the application and you write about them, it will sound like you are a really cool, well-rounded person with a different and unique story than a lot of people have.
Yeah. I mean, things that we take for granted. Like I visited prisons, Jewish inmates in prisons, and like people want to hear about that, like on my interviews. Or I spent a year teaching in Argentina, and the kids could barely read, and like that was everyone wants to know about these experiences. So, sound interesting, sound cool. Um, just yeah, get a life outside of medicine, basically.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, if you have any questions, you can comment below. You can get in touch.
I do, Mandy. I
And
do want to. What do you think about medical missions to like third world countries?
so I think medical missions. So yeah. So before we wrap up, it's a good specific question to cover. I think medical missions to third world countries are a really, really, really cool experience. I speak to some of my classmates in medical school. You know, for them, when they talk about it, it sounds like it was really a transformative experience that they're passionate about, and it wasn't just a resume pattern. That being said, and I've seen a lot of opportunity for a lot of them, I find them hard to. I find it hard to work for someone who's a frum Jew. You know, a lot of times there won't be a lot of kosher, or keeping Shabbos will be complicated unless it's through a Jewish organization. I find that it may not be really feasible for a frum Jew. If it is through a Jewish organization and you have that opportunity, I think that might be the single most unparalleled volunteering experience you can have from my interactions with peers who have done that. What do you think?
Okay, so I know that people have really amazing experiences. That's true, but I think a lot of the medical missions, I'm a little critical of them. I think a lot of them are just paid tourism. Like I'm going to pay you to come to your hospital so that I can look good on my application. So I think be wary of them. Be careful how you write them. Never ever mention, even if I know someone who's telling me that they did some like procedures in the hospital. I'm like, oh my god, do not ever write that on your application. That you did like that you were practicing in the third world country. You should not be doing that. So never write that. So be careful what you write. Be careful you're not just like exploiting a third world country for your benefit. You know,
That's a good point.
That's not good.
It's a good point. But as you can see, right, there's a variety of opinion and experience between Mendy and I, and we have similar experiences. You can only imagine how diverse the experiences are of people within JPN, of applicants in general. So capitalize on what makes you unique. And even if there is diversity in opinion of what's important and what's not, find what works for you and just be a good, well-rounded human being. All right.
Yeah, if you're narrative, like it's important to have a narrative coming to your medical school. If your narrative is global health, go on a medical mission, right? Try to make your own narrative. That's really important, like a narrative, you know?
Well said. Well said. All right, we're gonna wrap this one up. If you have any questions, comments, get in touch, comment below, and we'll see you on the next video.